when we talk about joint effects and joint operations, there is no country in the world that is able to do joint to, and we screw it up sometimes too, but there's nobody else that does joint operations to the level that we do.
And when you say joint operations, you mean bringing the Marines, the Air Force, the
Yeah.
Navy, just the
Yeah.
synergy of it all.
So I had buddies that, after day three, they dropped the harms in the HTS pods, which we use for seed, and they started putting bombs up on the Vipers, and we were strikers, and guys that are taken off, and you don't even you have a keypad maybe that you're going to. You don't even really have a mission set. It's not like a standard mission profile where you've got target photos and you're going out to strike a specific thing, and you kind of have a specified ingress and egress route. Just taking off and then picking up on the fly calls from JTAX or whoever and coming in and dropping stuff and making bad people go away. I mean, at the end of the day, that's our job, man. Our job is to turn stuff into hair, teeth, and eyeballs.
Oh, I one of the best quotes I ever heard was putting warheads on foreheads.
Yeah.
I heard that from a guy in Black Hawk Down where there were no fighter jets, obviously during
Yeah.
that battle, but he had a good quote about that. I want to talk about the Balad deployment because you said you were in Balad for 6 months. Was that
Hmm.
deployment?
Yep.
So what year is that? And just give us a little bit of background before we dig into it.
Yeah. So I got to Balad in July of '08 and left in February of '09. So it was after the surge. We weren't doing a lot of kinetic operations. We had really shifted more to kind of what we called NTISR, which was non-traditional intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, and direct support for guys on the ground. So it was a mix of working a lot with the Army. But one thing that we did do and got really good at when we were at Balad was working with the special ops guys. Worked a lot with the Rangers and with the Delta guys who were on the other side of the base from us at Balad. So um, go ahead.
Perfect. So this is what I'm curious about. So you're a fighter jet. You're flying an F-16.
Yeah.
When you're working closely, whether it's gaining intel or it's not maybe as kinetic, or maybe it does go really hot. How does a fighter jet? What do they bring into a special operations situation?
Well, I'll tell you a story. I think this will help spell it out a little bit. So one night I'm working a keypad over Baghdad, protecting the green zone. And fairly benign. It's dark. We've got goggles on. And basically we're talking to a JTAC, a joint terminal attack controller who's sitting in a TOC, which is a tactical operations center. This guy's probably been in Iraq for 6 months. He knows and we had video downlink with our targeting pod, so he can see on his screen what we're seeing in the jet. And so, he knows all the corners and all the spots and everything. And so we're talking to him about, hey, does this look like anything of interest? No. Does this? No. Just kind of a fairly benign sortie. And then all of a sudden we get called by the KAC on frequency, and they go, hey, we need to re-roll you guys over here. So we go, okay. So my wingman gets rejoined. We grab a tanker. We top off on gas as we're cruising up to Tikrit, which was Saddam's old town. It's probably about, I don't know, 40 miles maybe north of Balad. It's about 80 miles north of Baghdad. And we get on station and get on Fires Freak, start talking to the JTAC, and there's an objective building. And so we had targeting pod contracts at the time, so we were always a two ship. So a flight lead and a wingman. I'm the flight lead on this sortie. My number two put his targeting pod on the objective building, and then I start talking with the JTAC to figure out, okay, what's going on? Like, what is this op about? Where the good guys at? Where the green guys at? Possible, ingress egress routes that they're going to take to the objective building or off of the objective building. And because what they would typically do is when they would roll to an objective building, they would go in on foot because the noise signature is less. So they would kind of set up in Bradley's typically. I don't know, maybe a click or two away and kind of blocking the positions north and south, and then they dismount on foot. So while my number two is looking at the target building with his targeting pod, trying to see if is there anybody on the rooftop, is there anybody in the courtyard, does he see anything kind of out of place with that building, and then just the buildings right in that area. I'm running the routes. What are their ingress routes? What are their egress routes? I'm looking for spotters on rooftops, snipers on rooftops. Um, anything that looks like it could be a blocking position, any hot spots on the ground that could be potential IEDs in the targeting pod. I'm doing all of that with my targeting pod. while the special ops guys are waiting for whatever their trigger is to know that whoever they're looking for is there and they're going to go. So we get on station, we're doing that work. And probably about an hour and a half later or so, whatever trigger they needed, they caught. And so they dismount, they start going up to they start working their ingress route to the house and they go to breach. And when they would breach, we'd have what we called squirter contracts. And I know you've heard that term before, right? So, and what we would basically do is we would just bisect the building. And if it came out the north side in this situation, if somebody came out the north, I owned them. If they came out the south, my wingman owned them. So they call breach. I see these guys go in, and I'll tell you one of the things that you learn about the special ops dudes and why they're so good is because it's how fucking fast those guys move, man. They are so fast. Like they are so precise. It's pretty impressive to watch. So these guys go in, they kick the door in, they clear probably a 2-story building home in less than a minute. Pretty quick. But when they kick in the front door, I got a dude that runs out the back. So I call squirter to the north. They tell me to monitor him, which is all that means is I'm going to follow him with my targeting pod, right? So I follow this guy and he's jumping courtyard to courtyard to courtyard. And I think it's, if I remember correctly, the east side, it's the Tigris River kind of bounds one part of Tikrit and they irrigate off it for farm fields and stuff. Well, this guy runs about 150 meters out into a farm fields and lays down in a ditch. So once they clear the house, they're like, all right, walk us to the squirter. So I'm bouncing my targeting pod back and forth between where this guy's laying down in a ditch and the 5-man team that's walking out to go get him.
And
I'm like, all right.
Can they see when you say you're bouncing your targeting pod? Are they able to see that on like?
No.
Oh, okay.
Nope. So I'm just moving it back and forth because I'm like telling, all right, turn left, turn right. Okay, you guys are going to hit a field. Okay, he's 60 meters off your nose. He's 30 meters off your nose. He's 20 meters off your nose. And they're like, okay, sparkle. Well, we had on the sniper targeting pod, we had a IR pointer. And when you looked at it off the jet with goggles on, it looks like a lightsaber coming off the jet. And so you can illuminate a spot on the ground. So they got their goggles on. I illuminate the spot on the ground that they can see. And so they kind of have a general idea of where he is. I mean, it's a big spot because it's dispersed because of the altitude that I'm at. But they have a general idea now. I don't know this, but the dude's actually laying down in like some reeds or some growth. So they can't see him from their vantage point, but he is prostrate. I can see all of him because he just ran for a mile and is hot as hell, right? So in IR mode, I can see him like nobody's business. And so I walk him out to him and they ended up killing him, I think. But anyways, that's the kind of stuff that we would do with our targeting pods. I found a spotter or a sniper on a rooftop one night and saw the special ops guys go about 2 blocks down to a higher home and snipe the dude before they went in on foot. That was the kind of stuff that we were doing with our targeting pods over there in direct support of of their operations.
That's all. See, this I had no idea that fighter jets were capable of doing something like that.
Yeah.
If you had asked me, I would have been like, I would assume a helicopter or something would have done that. Because walk me through this, because it's a little hard for you. You're making all these calculations, but how fast are you flying while doing all this?
So typically we were working in the 12 to 14,000 foot block, and we weren't going very fast. We were only doing about 300 to 350 knots, which
Gotcha.
for us is not fast. And honestly, the hardest thing that you have to do when you're working the targeting pod is make sure that you have your geometry set so that you don't mask the targeting pod at critical phases. Because there are situations where, like, if you're running away from a target, as the gimbal on the targeting pod is swinging to look back, you can actually get to a place where it can't look back any further because the belly of the jet gets in the way, and then you'll mask the picture that you have. So you just have to be really cognizant of your geometry in relationship to the target and the eagles or the friendlies, and what you want your targeting pod to be able to see as all this shit goes down.